Microsoft recently this week announced they will cut 3% of its global workforce as it seeks to streamline operations and layers of middle management. I can't say I disagree with that. Airbnb had a massive PR launch of their new services. They had everyone from Gabrielle Union, Lala Anthony, Christina Aguilera was there, Kevin Hart was there. So Moët Hennessy has a crisis, a financial crisis. Welcome back, everyone. This is the 4th episode of the Vanessa Podcast. I'm your host, Vanessa Sanyauke, and if you're new here, I'm the founder of the Hill App and Girls Talk. What we do is we connect women to purpose-led brands and businesses. And I'm just really enjoying getting into the flow of podcasting. And before we get started, I've got a few requests. If you are watching on YouTube, please, can I just ask you for one tiny favor? Please, can you subscribe? I can't believe the amount of people that watch the podcast but don't subscribe. So it helps more people find out about our community. And if you are listening on Apple or Spotify, give us a follow. Just click follow, and every week we will appear on your phone. And again, the more followers we have, the more subscribers, the more our community can grow. But thank you to those who watched our last episode last week. So let's get into this week's news. There's quite a lot to get through. I'm really excited to get deep into this. So first up, the S&P 500 wipes out all of the losses made in 2025 this week due to the announcement of the US and China tariffs deal. Okay, so let me just fill you in. So I got this of the Financial Times, okay? So just bear with me. So the S&P 500 is an index of the top 500 companies in the US. Now, when who shall not be named went on a madness with the T word, the S&P 500, that index dropped like massively, one of the worst drops in decades, and made so much losses. But earlier this week, the US and China agreed on a trade tariff deal, and after that announcement, it just shot straight up. So the S&P 500, it closed 0.7% higher after data showed that it dropped 2.3% in April. So what this did was it gave it a very strong rebound, and it left the Wall Street benchmark 0.1% higher for 2025, which is excellent news, especially for those of us like me. If you have an S&P 500 index tracker, it's on the up now. Rising trade tensions had already hurt US stocks before Trump's Liberation Day. On April 2nd, the S&P just tumbled after that because it was just a madness. The index was down as much as 15% in 2025. But stocks rose 3.3% on Monday after the US and China said they would both cut tariffs for at least 90 days following talks in Switzerland over the weekend. So investors have been rushing and revising their estimates of the economic damage from the trade war. So Goldman Sachs has increased its forecast for US earnings growth and its year-end S&P target. So what they feel that the S&P 500 will end the year on. So following the deal between US and China, analysts are now saying that lower tariff rates mean that there's better economic growth with less risk of recession than we previously expected. So in my first episode, we were talking about how it was really touch and go on whether the US would head into a recession. And if it did, it might spark other countries to have the same fate. So tech stocks were very happy about that as well. They made lots of gains on Tuesday as well. Real estate and healthcare stocks, however, declined. But this is quite interesting. The Financial Times does report that US stocks, they continue to lag behind big markets in Europe, though, right now. And China's SCI 300 benchmark. So I think it's still got a way to go in terms of coming back up, but it's looking quite good. Some analysts have said, look, we need to be cautious about this because the US tariffs of 30% on imports from China and 10% elsewhere, it's still much higher tariffs than when who shall not be named took office. So I think they're saying, you know what, we have to just see how it goes. So what do I think about this? I'm kind of just tired of this whole tariffs trade stuff. It's a lot of drama and wahala. And I think there's a game being played. I think who shall not be named is playing a game. He wants to be seen as a hero. So he's just effing stuff up to then now come across as, look, I've negotiated these amazing deals, and really he made things worse and then just backtracked. But it's all about his personal brand and his perception. And I also think, we saw this with TikTok. If we remember, the TikTok ban in the US was because of his people. They started it. They were kicking off about TikTok when he was in power. And then now when he took office, he was acting like the hero and said, I'm going to use my exec powers to stop the ban on TikTok, when it was his people that started it in the first place. So he's playing games. And I think this tariff stuff is all a game. I think it's too early also to tell the repercussions on the stock market and on the worldwide economy right now. I think by the end of Q2, so by the end of June, we will know for sure what are the effects. How has growth been in the US and around the world? For me, I want to look at the growth, the GDP figures, gross domestic product figures for US and UK. And then we can sort of see a more accurate picture. And it will also be the end of H1, which is the half year. And so we can kind of get an idea on, are things looking on the up or are things looking down? Interestingly, my financial advisor, we were having a talk and planning for my pension and retirements and what I need to do, because a girl is getting to a particular age. I can't just be putting this off in terms of thinking about the R word, retirement. So, I previously just invested in the S&P 500 as my index fund tracker. But what my financial advisor is doing now is actually diversifying my portfolio. And a lot of financial advisors, where they would invest their clients' money for them, a lot of firms, a majority would invest in US stocks. So typically the S&P 500, because it's one of the best performing index funds in our history. But recently, a lot of funds are now looking at diversifying and pulling back on US stocks and looking at other markets. So that's what my fund manager is doing. And they are looking at UK, which I told you, I think UK is a broke girl. But I said, you know what? Okay, diversify. So we're looking at UK, but also China. So it's interesting. I think we're going to be seeing a lot of pension funds and wealth management funds, maybe not so much relying on the US stock market now and looking to be a bit more diverse. But I still do believe in the S&P 500. It's one of the most, predictable funds. It goes sort of like, up every 20 years, down, up, down, but it does perform the best. So let's see what happens with that. Okay, tech bro news. Microsoft is back again. I literally talk about Microsoft every episode, but Microsoft plans to axe 3% of their workforce in the latest round of job cuts in the tech sector. So Microsoft recently this week announced they will cut 3% of its global workforce as it seeks to streamline operations and layers of middle management. I can't say I disagree with that. A lot of middle managers I kind of call blockers. So I don't necessarily think it's a bad thing. You want to be really efficient. The group said that it would eliminate about 6,000 roles. So that's a lot in its international offices and at LinkedIn. The moves follow performance-related job cuts this year that also affected about 2,000 Microsoft employees. So if I read that right, they would have to date laid off about 8,000 employees. I mean, Microsoft is a major company, but that's still quite a lot. They said in a statement, we continue to implement organizational changes necessary to best position the company for success in a dynamic marketplace. Microsoft has joined the likes of Amazon and Meta in cutting thousands of roles in their companies as they think about how can they rebalance their workforce and invest more in AI. We spoke about that last week, as they've got a lot of competition from OpenAI. So it's quite interesting. Earlier this year, Meta cut about 5% of their workforce, but this was quite interesting. They cut 5% of their workforce as low performers, and it had about 74,000 employees at the end of 2024. So that's loads. I remember back in the day when Meta had about 16,000 employees and it was like, oh my gosh, they're big. They had 74,000 employees. It's major. So they've already cut almost a quarter of its employees in the past few years. Amazon said the same thing. They want to have less bureaucracy, which I hate bureaucracy, especially in big companies. So I can see where they're coming from. They want to have less middle managers, which I think is good. Amazon eliminated 27,000 roles in major job cuts in 2023 and in 2024. What was interesting is earlier, Microsoft had about 70 billion in one quarter in terms of their revenue. They had posted massive profits just in the last quarter. They make money. And so their shares have outperformed peers. So I think the narrative is, wow, Microsoft cuts 5% of their workforce. But then again, it's like, but you're making P. You're making so much money. And then it's like, but you're cutting your workforce. So I think my thoughts are this. So Microsoft have money. They are one of the, they are the world's most valuable company. Okay. So if the world's most valuable company is cutting 5% of their staff, like they've said, it's about being efficient. And I think people forget that when you are a company, especially a public and massive company like Microsoft, Amazon, and Meta, you've IPO'd. I could be a shareholder. You could be a shareholder. They need to make us money. They're there to make us money. They're not there to be pretty flowers. They have a job to do. It's a business and you've got to be efficient. So I think the media plays a really important part in terms of a narrative. I think they like to scaremonger and be like, oh, Microsoft cuts its workforce. A lot of companies on a regular basis will cut their workforce. Even us SMEs, every year you look at your P&L and you think, where are we spending the most? And people, HR is a cost center. So you're constantly thinking, where can we reduce? And so it's about being efficient. That is the harsh reality. You might not like it, but that is the real world that we live in. And companies are looking at how AI, as we mentioned before in previous episodes, they're looking at how AI can make them more efficient. And sometimes certain roles have to be streamlined. I think what is a bit of a shame, I mean, when you think about it with Microsoft, 6,000 people, that's a lot. That's a lot of people to keep on your payroll. Because what I was thinking was, okay, is there a way to move them around to perhaps a different place in the business? But that's a lot of people and you're just going to make really hard decisions. And it's just that time of the year, especially every year, you have to kind of be lean. I think gone are the days now. So I remember like maybe 2012 vibes. It was like Meta would bring out a brand new spanking office, Google and Amazon's. And it was like the social media giants, or we used to call them FANGs. So Facebook, Apple, I don't know what the other one was, but I think it was Facebook, Apple, Google and Amazon. And they were the sexy kids. Everyone was trying to work there. They had perks. It was like they were trying to like lure all of these millennials and made themselves really cool. And it's like, it's just the way of the game, you know? They kind of were like, yeah, luring people in. And then when they were done with them, vamos, we don't need you no more, B. Bye. And that's harsh. That's heartless in a way, you know? You lure people in with ping pong and a beer tap and dry cleaners in the office and paying for their meals. I don't know if anyone's been. So I've been to the Meta office in London and I've been to Amazon's office in London. And I've been to Google's office in London and I've had dinner at Meta. I had a meeting and I had, not dinner, but I had lunch. When I tell you, it is literally like a 5-star hotel. You have starters, mains. You can have Korean food. You can have Italian food. They were treating their staff every day to gourmet meals and they were luring us. And then it's like, oh, okay, now we got you here. They're done with you. Meta said also that 5% of their workforce cuts that they made this year were towards bad performers. And I just think the language, we've spoken about this before, language is so important, because now the people that were the victims of Meta's last job cuts, they'd been labeled in the industry as bad performers. And so when you're now job searching and they say, well, why did you leave your last job? They were like, oh, I was laid off by Meta. And then they're going to be like, oh, you were the bad performer, so why should we hire you? So I think Meta should not have gone down that route. I think Mark should have just, loose lips ain't good. Should have really just kept it quiet, because you're now doing a disservice to those who are looking, and they're now tarnished with the name of being shit, basically. Okay, so in further tech bro news, Airbnb. Now, I never thought I would be talking about Airbnb in tech bro news, but hey, it's a new day. Airbnb had a massive PR launch of their new services. They had everyone from Gabrielle Union, Lala Anthony, Christina Aguilera was there. Anyone, Kevin Hart was there. Everybody was there. So now, via Airbnb, you can book private chefs and personal trainers and more on Airbnb. So I got this from the Business Insider. You can also hire hair and makeup artists or photographers to come to your Airbnb and also home, I believe. So on Tuesday, Airbnb launched an offering called Airbnb Services. It allows people to hire on-site professionals. These professionals include private chefs, photographers, massage therapists. Oh, I love a good massage. Personal trainers, that's good. Hairstylists and makeup artists, and they can come to your Airbnb or your home. So having that at your home, that is what I'm interested in, because I do have a masseuse that comes to my home, but sometimes it's really hard to get her availability. So I would love that, having a hairstylist. I wonder how that's going to be for women of my shade with our black hair. How diverse are they going to be in terms of the people on their books? I think private chefs would be amazing. I do like to cook now and again, but booking a private chef, I don't feel should be for the rich and famous. I think there is an app, though, where you can hire a private chef, but I think maybe doing it on Airbnb might change the game. Airbnb said that the services are available in 260 cities. I really hope London is one of them. And many start from as low as $50. That's what? 35 quid. Sold. So the new feature, they say, could sway travelers in terms of their decision on whether to book Airbnb or a hotel. So their chief business officer, Dave Stevenson, hey Dave, he said that it's Airbnb's way of trying to win customers from hotels. So quite exciting, actually. I think their stock, I'm sure, has risen. And I'm going to be watching Airbnb. Okay, what do I think of this? All right, so for me personally, it depends. So when I go back home, and when I say back home, I mean like South Africa or Zimbabwe. So I'm from Zimbabwe, but some of my mum's family and also my dad's, they're now based in SA. So if I'm going there for a long time, or when I go to Zimbabwe, I tend to book Airbnbs because, one, there's not many hotels in Zim, but also I'm staying there for a longer period of time. And so it's more comfortable, and it makes me feel like I'm at home, more at home when I'm in an Airbnb. I love to be able to wake up when I want to, not have to rush down and make breakfast at like 10 a.m. What kind of foolishness is that? I'm on holiday. Why would I want to have breakfast at set times, or be charged £20 to have breakfast in my room? No, thank you. I'll go to the shop and spend £5 and cook my breakfast for the week. So Airbnb for me is cost effective. I do book hotels when I'm like super stressed and I want a break. So maybe I want to dine at the hotel, drink a nice cocktail at the bar. Maybe I want to have spa services. Maybe they've got a nice gym. Maybe I want to use the concierge and feel like I'm on holiday. So like when you're in a hotel, you don't have to do anything. You don't have to make your own bed. You don't have to cook. You feel a bit more like you're on holiday. So I think it just depends on what experience you go for. I had a really bad experience, right, with Airbnb when I was in South Africa. So it was my Airbnb, my first Airbnb in Johannesburg when I stayed at an apartment. I bet you he's watching this podcast now because he's turned into a stalker just because I gave him a 2 out of 5 star review, which I felt was fair. He didn't like that, and he proceeded to Google me and make comments and say, well, you were posting on your Instagram page, so you must have liked my apartment, etc., etc. He got cussed out, obviously, if you know me. And I complained to Airbnb and they took it seriously because I was like, one, I'm a solo female traveler. that is unacceptable. He's a male host and he lives in London and he's stalking me. Like, because on Airbnb, you just put your first name. So I don't know, maybe he'd used my image on Google Images and maybe I came up. He went down a rabbit hole. So he was absolutely out of order. And so they took it seriously. They were like, we take it seriously. They called me straight away. They did an investigation. I mean, they took it seriously and they cussed him out. So I think in terms of Airbnb, they do take people's safety seriously, which gets me to my next point. So say you've gone to a place, maybe you're a solo traveler. Okay, you booked an Airbnb and you want your safety to be, 150%. So booking a chef or booking a masseuse or booking a hairstylist, they're coming now into your space. I feel like it makes you vulnerable. So I do want to know a bit more around their safety for their users. Like, how are we going to be safe with all these strangers up in our business? Are they vetting people? Do they do DBS checks? Like, how are these people being vetted? And can we leave reviews on the hairstylists and the masseuses and the chefs? I think that's really important. I don't think I'd want to, book someone and I don't know, if they're a psycho. Sorry about my words, but do you know what I mean? Not very inclusive language, but I'm trying. But you get my gist, yeah? And I think that's really, really important. How will they keep the users safe? I think these services are more so if maybe you're at home. So for me, I think I would want to check out the services for booking at home because I live in London. But I think it's more so if you booked a house or a villa. I don't think if you booked an apartment, you wanting to have a chef and all of these people up in your apartment. I think it's more so for those that are booking big places. I think it'd be quite interesting. I don't know if there are chauffeur services, but I think that for me, being able to book, say I booked my Airbnb, having my airport transfers done through Airbnb, having a chauffeur, a driver, I think that would be very useful. I think where they're going to struggle is, what I like about some hotels is the concierge. So you can go to the concierge and say, can you get me a table at the hottest restaurant in town? And the concierge can do that. That's why I quite like hotels, especially in new cities. I remember when I went to Rome, oh my goodness, I went on a solo trip and I booked an Airbnb. Big mistake. Got there, this man's yard stunk of cigarettes. It was in the bed sheets. I couldn't breathe. It was disgusting. After a night, I checked out and I said, absolutely not. And I went to stay in a hotel. And I tell you, I just felt like, hallelujah. It was just I just felt so relaxed. I got into my hotel room. The concierge was like, what do you want? I got my cocktails to my room. I got to go to the bar. It was like I was being looked after. And so I think if you get a rubbish, shit Airbnb, then you're screwed. So I think hotels, they've got a long way to go because hotels, they have really good concierges. They have restaurants. So I think for me, for example, if I'm stressed and I want a beach holiday, I'm going to book an all-inclusive. I get up, I eat, I'm at the pool, I'm drinking, I eat, I go again tomorrow, You can't do that in an Airbnb necessarily. So I think it depends on, I don't know whether they've kind of decided on what type of traveler they are targeting. They have to be very, very clear on who they are targeting. And I thought it was interesting how they went all out on PR, getting all of these celebrities. I mean, are these celebrities booking Airbnb? I don't know, So again, that's one to watch. Let's see. I might book it and then give you a review about how it was. So my last story is quite interesting. So Moët Hennessy has a financial crisis. So Moët Hennessy is the wine and spirits empire owned by Francis Louis Vuitton, Moët and Hennessy conglomerate. So they own fashion brands and Moët and Chardonnay Champagne, Hennessy Cognac. They own the champagne brand and Moët Hennessy. So the Moët and Hennessy spirit and wine brands, they went from generating 1 billion euros in cash for the business in 2019 to actually burning through 1.5 billion euros last year. And this was according to documents seen by the Financial Times. The Financial Times did this massive piece about it. So it was absolutely interesting. And they said that they had aggressive price increases and they just went on a spree of acquiring so many different luxury groups, drinks and businesses. And they're saying they also acquired Dom Perignon champagne and they just went on a shopping spree. And now it's kind of like the companies that they bought are not making their money. So It's also been hard hit by a global downturn in sales of alcoholic drinks. So there's a big wellness, I guess, movement going around the world. I mean, I'm even on it. I'm trying to now reduce my drinking during the week and also drinking in general. So they were kind of saying it was due to some strategic decisions made under the leadership of their former CEO, Philip Schultz, who left the group at the start of 2025. But they just said, look, they struggled to maintain being a profit-making business. They increased their prices. And what they tried to do is they tried to push direct to consumer sales. So you and I going to Asda and buying a bottle of Moët rather than focusing on selling to hotels, restaurants and nightclubs and bars, right? And that's apparently what has made their business struggle. And interestingly, Moët Hennessy has been a cash cow for LVMH for years. However, last year, they had a meeting with their senior managers and the group said, we're going to issue you a stark warning. We need to save cash ASAP. And they saw a surge in sales during the pandemic because we were all stuck at home and, hey, we were all buying pajamas and wine and alcohol, right? But now we're outside. We're like, okay, that went down. And so they said that in April, LVMH reported that its wine and spirit sales fell by more than 9% in the first quarter. So that's a big dip. And that was compared to a 3% decline across the business as a whole. Moët Hennessy's profits from recurring operations dropped 36% to 1.35 billion euros last year. That is massive. So it's now becoming one of the worst performing divisions in terms of sales growth for LVMH in the past 2 years. They've had a lot of leadership changes and people fighting and just blaming each other because of this wahala. So what are my thoughts? First of all, no shade, Moët gives me the worst hangover in the world, but I love Verve, and Verve is owned by Moët Hennessy or LVMH. It's one of my favorite champagnes. But I think the direct-to-consumer target was just dumb. There's a global cost of living crisis, people. Some of us can't even afford eggs, can't afford olive oil. Do you know olive oil is £8? And you think I'm going to go to Asda and go and get Moët. That is the last of my worries. And furthermore, there's so much competition now with Prosecco and cheap champagne. I can go to Lidl and get champagne for £10. So what makes you think I'm going to pay £45 for Moët? Hell no. That was foolish. However, if I'm at the club and I'm lit, I'm with my girls and we've got no choice, am I going to buy a bottle of Moët? Yes. So I think their target should have been supplying bars, restaurants and hotels rather than thinking I'm going to go Asda and really go and buy Moët. Yeah, that was just flawed. People are not going out also as well. So even if they are pushing to sell to bars and hotels, I don't know if people are aware. People are struggling and we're just surviving. We're not thriving. We haven't been thriving since 1995. Okay? People are struggling out here. We have no money. We have no money. Cost of living done everywhere. And luxury goods, nobody cares about that. Have you seen my electric bill? Have you seen my mortgage? Have you seen my rent? I ain't got no time for no handbag, no shoes, no nothing. People are struggling. So the sales of luxury goods has gone down. Nobody cares anymore about having a fancy car, having the latest handbag, having the latest shoes. People are pulling back. Even me, I'm like, you know what? Thank you, the Lord, that I woke up today, that I can pay my bills. That is what I'm grateful for. I'm not looking at what handbag, what shoes, what's the next thing. People, I think these luxury brands, they really need to rethink their strategy. And I feel like, what are you doing to actually boost the economy? What initiatives are you doing? What social impact are you doing to make the world a better place? Because the better we do, we're going to have more disposable income. But read the room. Read the room. I'm not surprised sales are falling. So let's see what happens in terms of the next year and what they do. Are they going to sell some of their businesses? I'm sure layoffs are coming. Louis Vuitton's going to be quite interesting, especially in terms of luxury goods. What's going to happen there? I mean, it's a cost of living crisis in the world. I was going to talk about the M&S cyber attack. So M&S, Marks and Spencer, UK store. I love M&S food. M&S food is the best. But M&S had a cyber attack a couple of weeks ago. They were hacked into their systems, their shops, their tills, everything was down, their website was down, and some of the customer data was compromised and taken, and it's been terrible. You've actually not been able to order like your M&S shopping or make an order online for weeks now. It was one of the biggest, I think, cyber attacks we've had in the last couple of years. And there was a piece in the Financial Times that said their insurance, they've got cyber insurance. And you know what's so funny with the Hill app? Somebody was saying, cyber insurance? Have you got cyber insurance? Because you need to get that. And I was like, yeah, I will. So that was something that I got eventually. But now I'm seeing this. I'm like, if you lose your client's data, boy, you're done. So their insurers are going to pay out £100 million to them for the damages that they've got to, I guess, do and to repair. And interestingly, they had different insurers. So there was one insurer that was going to pay them X amount. They had like 3 different policies. So I think I will keep an eye on this story and give you a bit more maybe next week around what's happening with that. But it's just another example that if you are an entrepreneur and you're using people's data, you have got to be careful. You really got to do everything you can to look after people's data, because if you have a cyber attack, it's going to be very costly to rectify that. Time's flown. Oh my gosh, we've come to the end. I really hope you enjoyed this episode of the Vanessa Podcast, episode 4. I'm still in there, people. I'm still in the game. I'm going to be committed to this. Please don't forget, subscribe. YouTube, Apple, Spotify. And also, if you are feeling extra generous, leave me a comment on my YouTube and also on Spotify, and also give me a 5-star review on Apple Podcasts. And I'll see you next week.